Hello, my name is Paul Friga, and welcome to the Masterclass in Team Problem Solving, otherwise known as Team Focus from the McKinsey Engagement. This module is entitled The Overview, and in this section I'll introduce why this was created and what the intent is, who am I and why am I talking to you, and how is it organized in a way that you can use it for your individual and team problem solving. Let's start with the intent. Everyone these days works in teams, whether you're working in consulting teams or marketing teams or military teams, you work together. There are a lot of common problems that teams have, and over the time, we've identified best practices of solving for those problems. The intent of this online program is to walk you through step by step how to work best in a team and how to solve problems. And we've broken it up into interpersonal interactions and analytical tips. The audience for this could be anyone and any age. Primarily, this was coming out of research done in top consulting firms and how they solved problems, but it was inspired by the military. My father was a Marine, and I do a lot of executive education with leaders of our armed forces. And I'm often very motivated by the success they have in working in teams. So I've done research on this, and for the past 30 years, I've been working in teams, and I wanted to share some of the insights from my research as well as pragmatic advice for your projects. So who am I? I am a professor of strategy and entrepreneurship at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. But in previous lives, I worked as a consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers as well as McKinsey & Company. That work put me in pressure cooker situations in teams, but I also got best practice training, and I've been on my own journey to improve my team interactions my entire life. So after teaching this for the past 15 years and documenting the advice in a book entitled The McKinsey Engagement, these modules are the modern way of sharing our best practice tips, as well as walking you through examples of how you might be able to work it into an engagement using a sample project of a team I led, a student team here at the University of North Carolina. So finally, how are we organizing this material in a way that could be helpful to you? The entire program is based on 10 different modules, and this is, as I mentioned, the overview module. The rest of the modules follow a framework that I created entitled Team Focus. The team portion handles advice and best practice tips for you to work together successfully in a team and maintain a great esprit de corps so that you can be effective and efficient. In fact, the mantra or the goal of this is more efficient and effective teams. So the first part I'll talk to you about is called team, and the second is called focus. Let's move first into the team part of the module. We'll have 4 different modules focusing on the team concepts. And I organized those modules in a governing thought entitled, surprisingly, TEAM. So that's a very convenient acronym. Each letter stands for a critical success factor within successful teams. The T stands for talk, the E, evaluate, the A, assist, and the M, motivate. I'm going to go deeper in each one of those throughout the modules that are coming up, but just to give you a flavor, the T for talk is a governing thought that the communication within a team is one of the most important aspects. In fact, most teams, when they have breakdowns, there's a breakdown in communication, either within the team or within a client, an external member of the team that you're trying to work with. Evaluate goes into guidance about how the team should work together and set expectations for each other. So there has to be accountability in teams. The third letter, assist, is a critical part that goes to the emphasis that we're much better in teams. There's been a lot of research that teams are more effective than a group of individuals or an individual. So how do we assist each other in a maximum way? How do we interact and keep each other accountable and give each other feedback? And then finally, the M will get into the motivation. We're all driven by different things. Successful teams pay attention to the individual motivators They also celebrate achievements more because team success isn't just about finishing a project, it should be the enjoyment along the journey. So that's the model entitled TEAM, Talk, Evaluate, Assist, Motivate. We'll then move into modules on the focus side. This is the analytical, step-by-step approach to solving problems. One of my motivators for writing this book and creating these modules is I couldn't find a really good textbook that would explain how to solve a problem step by step. What I found was my training at McKinsey and PwC and research into a lot of other consulting firms, as well as just organizations in general, really surfaced some unique aspects of how to go about solving the problem. The general genesis for this is that you want to be specific in your team problem solving, but you want to iterate. One of the biggest problems is not having specific direction or boiling an ocean and gathering as much information as you can, inductively trying to solve a problem. This approach that I describe in these modules is more of a deductive approach. So try to frame things very carefully, identify hypotheses to test, and then you're more specific in your testing of those hypotheses. You iterate over and over until you find sufficient justification for recommendations. And then we also have tips on how to present those recommendations. So the model, or the acronym, is FOCUS, and that stands for frame, organize, collect, understand, and synthesize. The starting point for any project needs to be frame. And there's a tendency of teams to jump right in and gather data or start solving it, but this model requires discipline. And the discipline is in the frame part where you say, what's our key question? What are we answering? What's the basic information we have available to us after doing some early scanning of the company, competition, and customers and the market? And then what do we think the answer might be? You'll then move into organize fairly quickly, where you'll have a process map, or basically the steps by which you're going across solving it, and a content map, or some might call it an analytical plan, to test the hypotheses. What needs to be true for those to be true, and where's the data going to come from? The interesting part is you should also be thinking about the storyline. What's the outline of the final presentation? And we want you to be doing that very early. The frame and organize should only be about 5 to 10% of an entire project's time before you move into the collection and the testing of the hypotheses. You will then move to collect. And to be clear, there's some data collection that takes place in frame and organize. You have to get up to speed. But this is focused collection around testing of your hypotheses. If you say something is true, show me the support that would make that true, and then go prove it with data. This is a very data-driven approach to problem solving. It is incorporating insights and intuition in the creation of hypotheses, often from past experiences, but then you need to prove it or disprove it with data, objectively. So then you'll collect the data. We have some advice about how to do the slides and how to put the insights at the top, and how to do interviews and primary and secondary interviews and research gathering. And then you'll put that together in terms of collect. Then you'll move to the U, or understand. The expression that was taught to me at McKinsey was, what's the so what? What's the main insight of whatever you're looking at, and why is it relevant? How to document that, and advice on how to share that on good slides is presented. And then we wrap up with synthesize, which is the advice of how to tell a good story. Of course, if you were telling a story, you wouldn't wait until the end to start running those ideas by a client or someone outside your team. You would do it during the project. But this is final tips of delivery and storytelling. It's important to note that while it may appear linear in terms of the focus modules, it's not quite like that on a regular project. In fact, there will be starts and stops, and there will also be some very important iteration. For example, you'll start with a key question, whether it's provided by a client or you jointly created or your team comes up with it, but you got to have some narrowing down of what we're after, and don't be too high level or overly specific. But you have a key question. How do we increase revenue for the bagel shop that just opened in Chapel Hill? And then you'll want to get basic information. All projects have to get almost, some might call it a phase 0, fact pack, gathering of information to then create some hypotheses. If people have been working on projects or in consulting for a very long time, it may be more intuitive, but you like to gather some basic facts. A very common framework for that would be the 3 C's: company, competition, customer, and maybe macro trends if you wanted a fourth. So you gather basic information, You learn what's going on, but don't spend a tremendous amount of time there. It's just to get you started. Then you move to hypotheses. What do you think some answers to the key question might be? You need to prioritize this. You might create a list of 8 hypotheses, but prioritize the top 3 that could have the most impact to answering the key question. Sometimes the key question might be a dichotomous question. Should we launch a new wine in China? Sometimes it's more about improving profitability or some specific idea that might have multiple recommendations. So your hypotheses could be reasons why, if you're answering a dichotomous, or individual recommendations that you think would make impact. Then you'll begin your testing, and that's the organize and collect, where you'll look at support for each hypothesis, analysis to do, and the data that's necessary to prove that to be true or not true. You'll conclude that stream of analysis, usually owned by 1 or 2 people, sharing with the team as you go, and then it'll lead to an ultimate insight that that hypothesis makes sense or doesn't. Many of the hypotheses will go away over the course of a project, and some new ones might come from your earlier list and come back into play. But you want to always be prioritizing and only working on a few in terms of the main work streams of a project. Finally, you go to the recommendation stage, where you would actually develop your recommendations, and you would present the recommendations first based on the support that you created throughout the project. To be efficient and effective, you want to approach the entire project as if you're preparing for your final presentation.